and the claims are tricky, and you can't trust anybody when it comes to your food. So you need to make sure that you're making nutrition decisions based on the full picture, not just the front of the food that you've got there.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show. I'm Dr. Ashley, and today we are going to dive into a topic that you must master if you want to optimize your health, and that is reading a food label. So today I'm going to walk you through how to read them, what to look for, and I'm going to share with you the most common mistakes that people make and the most common tricks companies put in them to make them seem healthier than they really are. As for me, many of you know my story. I was a professional ballet dancer before I got into the field of nutrition and weight management. And I was an expert calorie counter. Like, I would rival the best apps for calorie counting, like MyFitnessPal. I was better than that. I could glance at what you were eating, any kind of meal, and I would be within 20 calories of how much you were ingesting there with that meal. I'm not even kidding you. And I thought that I totally understood during my dancing days how to read a food label. I'd look at serving size, I'd look at calories, and I'd look at how many grams of fat. Because we were told, well, you don't need to eat very much. You need to eat less to lose weight, and you need to eat less fat. I remember I would have days where I would just count the grams of fat that I was consuming in a day, and I'd eat like 3 to 5 grams of fat. Oh my gosh, so terrible. And I'm still not hitting my weight targets. And the same goes for clients coming into PhD weight loss. They're all calorie talk. All they care about is calories. They look at the food label and they look at calories, they look at fat grams, or they just look at the front of the label and they look at the claims. They say, well, gosh, it says keto, it must be low in sugar, or it says it's heart healthy, it must be okay for my type 2 diabetes. By no means are the heart healthy stamps saying that it's okay for diabetes. They'll also say, oh gosh, all these foods are equal. They'll assume that the foods are equal. And what I mean by that is all cereals are low sugar, or all yogurt is high in protein because maybe there's one type that's high in protein. So reading a food label is a science, you guys. You've got to understand what's going on with your food if you want to optimize your health. There's just no way around it. And we teach this to clients at PhD, and they say that this is one of the most important, one of the most eye-opening lessons that they learn in their PhD program. So I'm really excited to share it here with you today. So in this episode, as we go, I'm going to be talking about and referring to a gluten-free pasta food label. And so if you are listening to this on a podcast platform and you learn really well by seeing things and seeing examples, then you want to head over to YouTube, because I'm going to be showing on the video the food label that I'm referring to. If you can learn by me just explaining it and going through it with you, then that's totally great too. But this is a gluten-free pasta. And we're going to start up here when we talk about this food label up at serving size. And I want you to make sure that you always compare your portion to the recommended serving size on the box. So here on this label, we're talking about 2/3 cup of gluten-free pasta. And on the front of the box that you don't see here, it said sugar-free. So it's like sugar-free, gluten-free pasta. So if you eat 1 1/3 cup of this pasta, you have to double all of the numbers below it. If you ate the entire box, you'll see on the label, it says servings per container is 6. You'd have to multiply everything on this label by 6. So that's what would happen if you eat the whole box. So the calories for this item per serving is about 200 calories. If you ate the whole box, it'd be 200 times 6, which is about 1,200 calories for the whole box. Then you come to total fat. And remember that you need fat. Don't be like me back in my dancing days where you try to get as low fat as possible. It's terrible for your health. It's not going to help you lose weight, and it's definitely not going to help you keep the weight off. Remember that eating dietary fat's important because it provides slow releasing energy. It keeps you full longer, and it has a neutral effect on your blood glucose alone. And if you eat it with something, it actually blunts the glucose response. So if you eat an apple, for example, it's going to spike your blood glucose. It's going to raise your blood glucose, which is fine. That's a normal response. But if you eat that apple with a piece of cheese that has fat and protein in it, it's going to blunt that glucose raise even more. I talk about glycemic index a lot in a previous episode. I talk about how to regulate your blood sugar in this episode, so make sure you go back and you check that out. Under the dietary fat line, some labels will list the different types of fat. The only one you really need to avoid is trans fat. So just make sure that the item is trans fat free, but you really don't need to worry about saturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, monounsaturated fat. I wouldn't get into those details, just looking at total fat, making sure there's some there and that there's no trans fat. Then you'll see cholesterol on most food labels. You don't need to worry about cholesterol. We now know the science shows that eating dietary cholesterol does not raise blood cholesterol in the majority of us. I also did a previous episode diving into the nitty-gritty behind cholesterol and what it means and how it impacts the body. So if you want to learn more about that and why you really don't need to worry about it, go back to that previous episode. Then you'll come to sodium, and sodium actually isn't as bad as we've been told. And I actually dive into a lot about sodium in a previous episode when I talk about hydration. So if you want to learn about why salt really isn't that bad and why salt is actually good for you and you need salt, dive back into that previous episode. If you do have some kind of kidney disease or significant heart disease, then you do need to watch out for salt. If you got some medical condition like that, make sure you talk to your doctor about adding more salt into your diet. For our PhD clients in general, we always suggest to add more salt into the diet because they're eating such a great whole nutrient-dense food-based diet. Then you come to carbs, and carbs is a tricky one. Carbs include sugar, starches, and fiber, and you'll usually see sugar and fiber listed out underneath the carbohydrate line. So here in this item, you're going to see in this 2/3 cup pasta, 2 grams of fiber and 0 grams of sugar. In food items that include sugar alcohols, they're also going to be listed here too. And all of the items underneath carbohydrates are combined to get that total carbohydrate number. Each component listed out underneath the carbohydrate line impacts the body differently. So, for example, fiber isn't going to cause your blood glucose to raise. Sugar alcohols aren't going to cause your blood glucose to raise as much as regular sugar would. Now, sugar alcohols are all different. I also did a previous episode diving into the details behind sugar alcohols. Some sugar alcohols will raise your blood sugar levels, but some won't. Each is different. But in general, what most companies do is they list sugar alcohols, they list fiber there, and they list sugar also, all underneath the main header of carbohydrates. So one thing that I also want to help make clear is when companies use the word net or impact carbohydrates, you might be wondering what that means. Well, what they've done is they've subtracted the fiber and they've subtracted the sugar alcohols from the total carbohydrates. And they're saying the amount that's left over is the amount of carbohydrates that actually impact your blood sugar levels. They're saying fiber doesn't really impact your blood sugar. Sugar alcohols don't impact your blood sugar. So we're just going to take all those out of the total and we're going to leave you with the net or impact carbs, those carbs that are impacting your blood sugar or blood glucose levels. I hope that that makes sense. So let's, for the number's sakes, just say you have a food that has 10 grams of carbohydrate. Let's say it has 5 grams of fiber and 2 grams of sugar alcohol. They're going to take 10, they're going to subtract 7, and that leaves you with 3 grams of net or impact carbohydrates. Now, something that I think is important for you to understand is that we all metabolize fiber and sugar alcohols differently. They all impact us in different ways. So some people, their blood sugar might actually go up in response to eating certain sugar alcohols. So what I like to do, just to be conservative, if I'm trying to figure out net or impact carbs, I'll only subtract half of the sugar alcohols. So if you are eating a protein bar and it has 6 grams of sugar alcohols, I will only subtract 3 of those sugar alcohol grams from the total carbohydrates to give me the net or impact carbs. I hope that I'm making this clear to you. I know it's a little bit confusing. In general, for me and for PhD clients, I don't even look at net or impact carbs because I do think it's too much math and I think it's pretty darn confusing. I really just look at total carbohydrates and try to keep those underneath each person's unique carbohydrate tolerance level. Another thing that I want you to understand, that carbs are really sugar. A carbohydrate, even if it's a complex carbohydrate, goes into the gut and it's broken down, it goes out into the bloodstream as sugar. So even if you look at this gluten-free, sugar-free pasta, it's still broken down into sugar molecules, and you need to recognize that. What you can do to eyeball how much sugar you're getting in an item, I like to see things. I learn by pictures and by visualizing things. So what you can do is you can take total grams of carbohydrate and divide it by 4, and that tells you how many teaspoons of sugar you're metabolically getting in that food item. So let's say you're eating 2/3 cup of this gluten-free, sugar-free pasta, and in there is 44 grams of carbohydrate. Well, what you can do is you can divide it by 4, and that gives you 11 teaspoons of sugar. So there's no added sugar, there's no sugar in this pasta, but metabolically, it acts that way in your body. So in general, when you're looking at a product and it has carbohydrates in it, you want to aim for 1 serving is all you're going to eat of this item, and that you're getting about 15 to 20 grams of carbohydrate or less. Or less is fine, and you want to make sure that it has more than 5 grams of fiber. If you remember from my previous episodes, when you eat a carbohydrate and you incorporate more fiber, that also helps to blunt the blood glucose or blood sugar spike. So make sure that you're looking for more than 5 grams of fiber when you're getting an item that has carbohydrates in it. Okay, now we're progressing down. We're near the bottom of the food label and we see protein. Remember that protein is the key to longevity. It's the key to maintaining muscle mass, which is your metabolic currency. It's in charge of helping you build and repair muscle tissue. It optimizes weight loss and muscle mass. So when you are getting a protein bar, for example, make sure that the protein bar has at least 15 to 20 grams of protein in the one bar. If you're eating a meal, make sure that your meal is getting 30 to 55 grams of protein in each meal. The average range for a meal is about 30 to 40 grams, depending on your gender, your body size, and how much muscle you've got. So in this specific label, you can see that there's 4 grams of protein. This is not a good protein source. It's 1/10 of the amount of protein that you need for that meal. So this is why food is so confusing. You might have some people out there, they're saying, gosh, pasta is a good source of protein. They've seen the 4 grams of protein in there. That is not a good source of protein. People will be like, well, broccoli, gosh darn it, is a good source of protein. There's no protein to speak of in broccoli. It is not a protein source. So now when you look at a food label, you can say, okay, does it have 15 to 20 grams of protein? If I eat a serving of this, am I getting 15 to 20 grams of protein in it? No, it's probably not the best source of protein. Yes, go for it. It looks like it's a good source. So in general, when you're looking at a food item, you want to make sure that there's adequate fat, maybe more than 5 grams of fat in there. You want to make sure carbs are less than 15 to 20 grams in a serving and more than 5 grams of fiber. If you want to figure out net carbs, if that's important to you, you can subtract fiber from the total carbs and subtract 1/2 of the sugar alcohols. I just look at total carbs. I don't look at net or impact, so don't think you've got to. Remember, the more fiber you've got, and if you incorporate protein and fat, you're going to reduce the blood glucose spike. And never eat carbohydrates alone for that reason. Always add a fat and a protein to your carbs. Now we go down and we look at the ingredient list. This is the list of all of those items of what comprises the food. Remember that things are listed in descending order by weight, with the most abundant item first. So the first 3 things that you see in an ingredient list is mostly what you're eating. Remember that sugar comes in many names, many different forms. If it ends in an OSE, if it's an OSE, that means that it's sugar. It doesn't matter if the sugar is organic, if it's all natural, if it comes from brown rice, or if it comes from a beet. Metabolically, the sugar is metabolized the same. So when you're choosing an item and you're looking at the ingredient list, make sure, number 1, there's no sugar in the top 3 things listed. Number 2, that there's not many ingredients listed in total. And number 3, that you can pronounce everything that's in the ingredient list. Hey everyone, quick interruption to the Dr. Ashley Show. I want to remind you about Dr. Ashley Wellness, my new product line. After 17 years in nutrition and weight loss, I've noticed a gap in products for sustainable weight management. Weight loss can strain your body, leaving you tired and drained, and that's why I created Dr. Ashley Wellness. Our GLUCOCUT+ capsule stabilizes blood glucose, improves energy, supports your thyroid, and helps you burn fat. And our Electrolyte Plus mix keeps you hydrated while supporting your energy levels, immune function, and curbs cravings. Visit drashleywellness.com and use code Ashley10 for 10% off your first purchase or 20% off your subscription order with free shipping. Plus, enjoy a 30-day money-back guarantee. Back to the show. All right, now let's look at the most common tricks that companies put into their labels and then the most common mistakes that we make. So, most common tricks are the Heart Healthy stamp. The Heart Healthy stamp has specific criteria for saturated fat and cholesterol. Who cares? It's old information. We don't need that anymore. The Heart Healthy stamp does not look at how much sugar is in an item. If it's a refined grain, if it's processed, it really doesn't indicate if it's healthy for your heart or not at all. All natural, organic, again, doesn't tell you the makeup of the product. An organic Pop-Tart might have better quality ingredients, maybe, than a regular Pop-Tart, but it's still not healthy for you. An organic Snicker bar, they have organic Reese's Pieces. Really, your metabolism does not care if it's organic or not. It's not going to make a difference. Keto, be aware of keto products. If you look on the back, it might be keto if you have 2 tablespoons of the item. But who eats 2 tablespoons of a nut mix? Not me. I'd eat the whole darn bag and knock myself out of ketosis. Not that I live in that or if that's the goal, but I'm just saying that these labels, maybe you are trying to be keto. And you got to look at the back of the ingredient list and understand the label like I just shared. In keto foods, there's so many hidden sugars, there's fillers, it's so dense. So it really doesn't matter what they put on the front. Now you're educated, you flip over the item and you look at the label for what it means and you look at the ingredient list. Common mistakes that I see people make is that they overlook serving size. They see that box of pasta and they don't see that it's 2/3 cup and they go and they eat the whole thing instead. So be mindful of your portions. There are no free foods really out there, unfortunately. Number 2 is that they don't check ingredients. Remember that the most abundant thing is first. So make sure that there is no sugar, there's no trans fats, there's no additives in the top 3. Number 3 is that they focus on calories only, like I did back in my dancing day, but the type of calorie matters. All calories are not equal. They overlook sugars, they neglect fiber, and they misinterpret health claims. They see that it's gluten-free, that it's sugar-free, that it's all natural. I have a really funny story to share with you about this. So my son, Dash, he is 11 years old, and he was at school last week, and he told me the story when he came home from school. And he said he was at lunch, and there was a kid of his friend who came up, and he's like, "Hey guys, I'm really gonna work on my muscle gains." I imagine that he talked like that, this little 11-year-old. I'm really, I want to be good at football. I need to build some muscle. So just watch what I eat. You guys are going to be so impressed because it is so healthy and it's going to help me build all this massive muscle. So Dash goes, "Oh boy." And so the boy walks up and he comes back with an apple juice box and he goes, "See guys, juice from real fresh apples." And Dash was like, "Hey man, that's actually just sugar." He's like, "What are you talking about? There's no sugar in this. This is apples." He's like, "Apples are just sugar, especially in the juice form. It's just sugar." And he's like, "It says it's all natural and it's from apples." And he's like, "Sorry, it really is just sugar." And the guy says, "Whatever." So then he goes, "Just wait, I'll be back." And so he goes back up to the lunch line and he comes back with a box of gluten-free cookies. And you guys are probably all laughing with me right now. And he's like, "Dude, look at these cookies. See, they're gluten-free." And Dash is like, "Yeah, gluten-free doesn't mean anything, unfortunately. They're still just all sugar." And he's like, "No way, it's gluten-free. That means it's sugar-free." And Dash is like, "Man, I'm so sorry, but that's not healthy for you. And gluten-free really doesn't mean anything. And usually gluten-free items have more sugar in them to make them taste decent." And the guy's like, "Oh, whatever, Dash," and walks away. So I just thought that was funny because this is an 11-year-old boy, but most of us aren't far from that because the labels are tricky and the claims are tricky and you can't trust anybody when it comes to your food. So you need to make sure that you're making nutrition decisions based on the full picture, not just the front of the food that you've got there. So I hope that this episode was helpful for you. It's a little bit of a shorter one, but it's really, really important information. If you're watching this on YouTube, drop a comment below if any of this surprises you. If you have any questions on specific claims or food labels or ingredient lists, drop it below and I'll answer it for you. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform and you have any questions, come on over to YouTube. If not, leave a review and follow us. And remember, you've got to step up to make a change. Lead with your heart, train your mind, and do not negotiate with your body. I'll see you next time.